Howdy folks, welcome to Module 2 of the Microsoft SC-300 course. As you can see, today's module is called Implement an Authentication and Access Management Solution. This module consists of 4 main sections. It's not the only content though, it's got a lot of little subcategories if you will. The 4 main sections we'll be diving into in this module is Secure Azure Active Directory with Multi-Factor Authentication. And before I list anything else, I just want to bring it to your attention in case you don't know this yet. Azure Active Directory has now been renamed by Microsoft. I think they're calling it Entra ID now. So when I say Secure Azure Active Directory, I'm actually saying Secure Entra ID with Multi-Factor Authentication. Anyway, the second topic or the second section will be manage user authentication. The third will be plan, implement, and administer conditional access. And then the last one, the fourth one, will be manage Azure AD identity protection. So that'll be manage Entra ID identity protection if you think about it. Alright folks, if you haven't done it already, do your homie here a favor and give this video a like. It helps me, it helps the channel grow. More people will see these videos if you give them a like. And if you'd like to know when Module 3 for this course comes out, or just any of my other videos on my channel, then maybe also consider subscribing. Generally, if you're subscribed, then the platform will remind you when one of my videos goes live. Alright folks, let's go learn something. Alright folks, let's start at that first main section, Secure Azure Active Directory with Multi-Factor Authentication. And just a quick reminder again, whenever I say Azure Active Directory, I'm actually talking about Entra ID, guys. Now in this main section, one of the first topics we're going to be diving into is Azure Active Directory Multi-Factor Authentication features. So we're looking at features regarding the multi-factor authentication. Alright, so the first one I'm going to list here for you guys is password complexity rules. I think this is probably easily one of the most common and well understood ones. It simply means you've got to have a password that's a certain length. Normally it'll be 8 characters or longer. It's got to have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols in it. So the reason for that is so that people can't go and do things like a dictionary attack or a rainbow table attack. And it's also quite effective against brute force attacks, which is just, well, guessing your password. So the longer your password is and the more complex your password is, the harder it is for people to guess it and to crack it. So that's why we've got to have complexity rules. The second thing here is password expiration rules. So if your password does not expire, that gives people the opportunity to guess your password, or more of an opportunity to guess your password. And this also allows password cracking softwares to crack your password a lot easier. You'll find a lot of these password cracking softwares, they need time. And if your password does not expire, or if it does not expire quick enough, these password cracking softwares will be able to go and crack your password. Now, that's not the only reason why we make passwords expire. It's sometimes because maybe someone has seen your password. Maybe one employee or more than one employee has linked their account to a fellow employee, which is not something they're supposed to do, but sometimes they do that. So yeah, this basically mitigates against all those kinds of things. Then we've got self-service password reset. Microsoft just calls this SSPR for short. Now, in some cases, you actually do need to have a certain type of license before you qualify for this benefit. And in the old days, you actually need to go and turn this sucker on. Nowadays, I've seen a lot of these functions and features are actually turned on automatically. So that's probably a good thing. So this self-service password reset, it allows users to self-serve and reset their password if they've forgotten it without involving the IT department, which would be you. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this is the idea, users will take it upon themselves now to go and reset their own freaking password when they've forgotten it or when they've gotten locked out. But, deep down in our hearts, we know that's not going to happen. We know these users are still going to bug you. They're still going to send you an email or WhatsApp. They're going to call you or walk up to your office and say, I've forgotten my password or I've locked myself out. and you are gonna have to go and assist them. So I've done this at many of my clients, and where I did implement this, only about 20, maybe 30% would actually take it upon themselves to go and set this up. So you can go and turn it on for the company, but the users need to go and set it up themselves because they need to go and provide something like a cell phone number so that the platform knows where to send them an OTP or something like that in the event of them locking themselves out. Now, only 20 to 30% would actually go and take it upon themselves to go and do that. And on the day when they actually need to go and reset their password, only half of those folks would actually go and use the function. So in reality, you actually only have about a 10, maybe 15% compliance rate if you think about it. The other guys, the other 70, 80%, you are going to have to go and reset their passwords like the old days. So if you get anything more than 15, 20%, please let me know in the comments down below because that's just freaking amazing. Normally I didn't get that from my users. Then guys, we've got Azure Active Directory Identity Protection. So this is to help protect your organization's identities, being things like user accounts. You can go and configure risk-based policies that will automatically respond to risky behaviors. These policies can either automatically block the behaviors or initiate remediation, including requiring password changes. Just going to go look for, well, risky behaviors. If anyone starts doing anything out of the ordinary, yeah, it's going to start kicking in. Then we've got Azure Active Directory Password Protection. You can go and use this to go and block commonly used and compromised passwords via globally banned password list. Now you'll find that Microsoft actually has a built-in globally banned password list, and it's continuously growing. So if you go look at the common password, let me just throw it here on the screen for you guys. It's flashing on the screen. So those two passwords that I've got there on the screen for you guys, those are very commonly used passwords, especially on a Microsoft environment. And because of how commonly used they are, I mean, they do meet the minimum password complexity requirements. I mean, they're 8 characters or more. They're uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. But they're very commonly used. And because of that, Microsoft has banned these passwords. It's on Microsoft's globally banned password list. And in most cases, if you try and use these passwords on things like Microsoft, like 365 or the Azure platform, you'll find that it does not allow you to go and use that. You have to go and change it to a certain degree. Maybe you're going to have to go and add like a 1, 2, 3, 4 at the back, or maybe something else at the back. Otherwise, it will not work. It's because too many people have seen these passwords and they're very easy to guess. Then we've also got Azure Active Directory Smart Lockout. So Smart Lockout helps lock out malicious attackers who are trying to guess your user's passwords or who are trying to use brute force methods to get in. So brute force, once again, guys, that's guessing someone's password or using some sort of password cracking software to guess the passwords. In most cases, I just use some sort of password cracking software that I would normally go and get from the dark web. You normally get them using cryptocurrency, but that's a story for another day. So these recognizes sign-ins coming from valid users and treats them differently than other ones of malicious attackers and other unknown sources. So if you've got Smart Lockout, in a nutshell, if it sees sign-ins coming from an irregular location, irregular device, or anything in that matter, then it's going to treat them differently. If it's the same account, same device, same location, same time, it'll treat them as safe, I suppose. But as soon as that person suddenly logs in from a new location or a new device, I mean, it can actually be the actual person. I've seen actual people get blocked out of their own accounts. But rather have people blocked out of their own accounts, a false positive, than having an actual perpetrator pass or bypass your environment. So there is unfortunately a situation where people do get sometimes blocked out of their own accounts, but that's a small price to pay for security, I would say. Rather too much security than not enough. Then guys, we've got Azure Active Directory Application Proxy. So you can provision security enhanced remote access to on-premises web applications. This is especially useful, you'll see, if you've got people working from, well, off-premises, which is the case these days. You'll find that half of staff members, if not more, are working from someplace other than the office. They're working from home, they're working from the local coffee shop, or whatever the case might be. So whether it be your own staff, whether it be an outside contractor or consultant or a client, if they're trying to access certain resources on premises in your environment, they're got to go through the application proxy, which in a nutshell allows you to control reactions, and it's kind of like a firewall. Then we've got single sign-on, which we just normally call SSO for short. So this gives you access to applications. This includes thousands of pre-integrated software as a service applications. All in all, guys, that's just to make people's lives easier. So generally, if you go and do something like opening a web browser and you log on to, let's say, the 365 user portal, it will be very annoying if you open a new tab to go to the admin center of 365, or if you open a new tab to go to the Azure portal and you get prompted for your username and password every freaking time. Now, yes, security is a good thing, but there's also a thing of, time, which is a problem here. If people are going to be spending all their time just logging in the whole time, that leaves little to no time for what we call productivity. So single sign-on is something we use that prompts the user for a username and a password or something like that the first time they log into one of your platforms. And if they were to open a new tab on another Microsoft platform, it will keep them signed in. It's not going to ask them for a password and username every freaking time. So that means they've got more time to spend on, well, work for that matter. And then the last one I'm going to mention here on this specific list is Azure Active Directory Connect. Now I think Microsoft has renamed this to Microsoft Entra Connect, I think. Everywhere in this list of mine where you see me saying Azure Active Directory, just know that's called Entra ID now. And this last one where we say Azure Active Directory Connect, I believe that's now been relabeled to Microsoft Entra Connect. Yeah, don't ask me why Microsoft keeps relabeling this stuff. Only Microsoft would know. They love moving stuff and renaming stuff and deleting stuff and adding stuff. Sometimes for valid reasons, other times for no apparent reason. And this one, yeah, well, there's no good reason for this one. So the Azure AD Connect or Microsoft AD Connect, that is a tool that we normally use to go and synchronize our on-premises Active Directory with our cloud Azure Active Directory. If you're fortunate enough to find yourself having both of these. But that's not the angle they're coming at this from. So here they say it's to create and manage a single identity for each user across your hybrid enterprise, keeping users, groups, and devices in sync. So the idea here is, guys, assuming you've got the right configuration for this, because you actually get different kinds of synchronization, which they don't mention in this particular course. But if you've got the right configuration here, your users will be able to log on premises or in the cloud using the exact same username and the exact same password. But whether it will actually be the exact same username and password, that depends on other variables, which is not actually mentioned in this course. Things like pass-through authentication or password hash synchronization. Those variables will determine whether you actually use the same password or whether it's not the same password. Just something I thought I should point out to you guys, since it's not actually mentioned in this course, but it is something worth noting when you go and do this in the actual work environment. Alright folks, let's move on to the next topic. Categories of authentication factors. Now, in case you've forgotten or in case you don't know, authentication is when you prove you are who you claim to be, that you are indeed the owner to this account or the owner to this device. How you prove that? Well, that's up to the administrators. This could be something as simple as a username and a password, an email address and a password, or maybe the user has to provide something they've got physically on their person, like a bank card, a smart card, or this could even be maybe a biometric lock requiring a fingerprint, facial recognition, that kind of stuff. So when we say categories of authentication factors, guys, there's three main ones we talk about, the three most common ones, that is. But the three that I'm about to list, guys, is not the only ones. So before anyone goes in the comment section saying, that's not the only ones, I'm well aware. I'm simply saying these are the three main ones and the most common ones. The first one is something you know. So that will be something like a password, a PIN, a secret phrase. The second most common category will be something you have physically on your person. So that would be something like a bank card, smart card, a thumb. Heck, this can be your phone, for crying out loud. Because what do we receive on our phones these days? An OTP. In other words, a one-time PIN. Or nowadays, which is more modern, is to have some sort of acknowledgement that you have to go and acknowledge on the phone. This could be something in like your Microsoft Authenticator app, which I recommend you guys go and use. It's a very good app. Or this could be something as simple as an acknowledgement in your banking app. Maybe you are about to make some sort of transfer in your bank, and you've got to go and acknowledge this transfer in your banking app as an extra second authentication. The third category, folks, is something you are. So that's normally something biometric in nature. A fingerprint, retinal eye scan, voice recognition, facial recognition, and so on and so forth. Now, for something to classify as multi-factor, which is not the actual topic here, it has to fall into two of these categories or more. Two different ones or more. So if I ask you for a password and a PIN, that's two authentications, but they both fall into the same category, which is something you know. But if I were to ask you for a PIN number and a card, kind of like when you go to the ATM to withdraw money, that is something you know and something you have. So that would in fact be multi-factor authentication, just in case you didn't know. Now, if any of you guys are curious what some of the other categories might be, which is not actually covered in this course, and you don't need to know them, it could potentially be something like somewhere you are, because you also get geographic locks. And it can also be something that you're doing. And there's more and more, but we're going to take way too long of this lesson then. Now, speaking of taking way too long of this lesson, let's get a move on to the next topic, which is deployment considerations. Now, guys, when I say deployment considerations, we're talking about multi-factor authentication. Please keep that in mind when I say deployment considerations. That's what we're talking about here. So the first thing we need to consider rolling out multi-factor authentication in waves. So generally it's recommended you start with a small group. We call these pilot users. And this is basically to evaluate the complexity of your environment or, well, your client's environment and identify any setup issues or unsupported apps or devices. So if you go and use a small, teeny little group, maybe 10, 20, or 30 people, I like to go and use 20 or 30 people, then at least it's not a complete train smash. I mean, can you imagine you're rolling out something brand spanking new, not necessarily this multi-factor authentication, and you're rolling it out to a company that consists of a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand users, and it's a complete train smash. Yee, yeah, I don't want to be that person. Talk about awkward. Never mind awkward. You might get a warning, you might get fired, there might be some liability issues involved here. So yeah, guys, that's really something you don't want to find yourself in. So instead, whenever you need to go and do something, and this does not actually just apply to rolling out multi-factor authentication, you use a small group of people. We call them pilot users. I just normally call them guinea pigs in real life, but they don't like it when you call them that. And you go and taste it of them so you can identify if there are any issues. Secondly, guys, create a full communication plan. Transparency is key here, so it doesn't help you go and roll this out to all your users or your customers' users, and they've got absolutely no cooking clue what's going on. You need to keep people informed, especially considering that most of these users are not tech savvy like us. They're going to have no idea what's going on, so you need to guide them. You basically have to hold their hand, for lack of a better description. So make sure you create a full communication plan. Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication has several user interaction requirements, including a registration process. The users will need to go and register themselves the first time they try and use multi-factor authentication. And I'll bring up a slide about that in about a moment or two, so you'll see that shortly. So keep your users informed every step of the way and let them know what they're required to do. Important dates, and how to get answers to their questions if they've got trouble, who do they contact, how do they contact these people, what channels are there for them to go and make use of should they find themselves get stuck on something, which, well, let's face it, they probably will. So yeah, more about the registration process in just a moment. So before we get to that, let's talk about supported authentication methods. This is once again still about the topic about multi-factor authentication, guys. So what are the supported authentication methods? Well, guys, the first one is mobile app verification, which is my personal favorite because it's just, well, in my opinion, it's probably one of the most secure ones. Then you get what we call to a phone. You might think that's secure because it's an actual voice and all that. No, maybe in the beginning it was, but because of the way AI is these days, artificial intelligence and all that, you never really know these days. When you also get text message to a phone, which is, well, an OTP for lack of a better description. OTPs, maybe 10 years ago, they were very secure, but nowadays everybody has a freaking smartphone, which is essentially a computer. And as you guys know, computers can be hacked or compromised. The same goes for smartphones. If I have to tell you how many times I've been able to compromise someone's smartphone and have that phone send me that person's OTP, I'll be a very rich person. Unfortunately, we're not going to go into that kinds of detail. So mobile app verification is the way to go, at least for the present moment, until someone comes up with something clever again to bypass that. You never know these days. So these mobile apps will be the ones I mentioned earlier. This could be your banking app if you're doing your finances. This could potentially be the Microsoft Authenticator app as well, which I'm really a big fan of lately. It's annoying for me to have to go into the app and acknowledge and all that. It is annoying, I'm not going to lie about it. But at the end of the day, you do get security. And if someone's going to hack you or compromise your devices, trust me, that's going to be a heck of a lot more annoying. Now, speaking of authentication methods, we also have something called Azure authentication methods. Hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. Different countries have different ways of pronouncing Azure. Some will call it Azure, some will say Azure. There's many ways. Potato, potato, at least you know what I'm talking about. So with regards to Azure authentication methods, the first one is probably the most obvious: password. This is the only method that you cannot disable, guys, so just a mental note there. Then we've got good old-fashioned security questions. This method is available only for non-administrative accounts that use self-service password reset, in case you didn't know. The third Azure authentication method is email address. So this method is available only in self-service password reset. It's recommended that you avoid the use of an email account that doesn't require the user's Azure Active Directory password to access it. So you want to try and avoid using something like a Gmail account. Then we've got the Microsoft Authenticator app, and as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of this one. This method is available for Android and iOS. Users view the notification and, if it's legitimate, select verify. Otherwise, they just select deny. Now, even though Microsoft says this method is available for Android and iOS, I have actually seen it does work on Huawei's new operating system as well. And for the life of me, I cannot remember what Huawei's new operating system is now. One of my phones actually is a Huawei. I think it's a Huawei P40. It does have that new operating system that Huawei has made. So for those of you that's not familiar with the story, Huawei used to have an Android operating system, which is Google. And now they no longer do because there was an issue between Mr. Donald Trump and the Chinese company called Huawei. And yeah, so long story short, Chinese company Huawei had to go and make their own operating system now. And that's the one I can't remember the name of. So in the beginning, the Microsoft Authenticator app didn't actually work on it. Very quickly after that, they resolved the issue and it did work on it. And now recently I've seen it is starting to give issues again. It works, then it doesn't work. So the issues I've encountered myself, and maybe you guys have had a different experience if you've used this, it doesn't always update itself for some reason. Then you've got to go and uninstall the bloody thing, and you've got to go and re-download the latest version, which is quite tedious if you have to do this for other users. If it's for yourself, you only have to do it like once a month. It's not the worst thing. But if you've got to go and do this for multiple users, especially considering how many people have Huawei devices these days. So I've seen a lot of companies try and keep their people clear from Huawei devices, specifically because the headaches involved. So if you are concerned about those headaches, I would suggest trying to recommend to your people to try and use something other than Huawei. Not that it's a bad device. I'm not bad mouthing it. I love Huawei. It's just there's too many issues. Alright guys, and then we've got OATH. I can never pronounce that. Oath Hardware Tokens, or however you want to go and pronounce that. So this is an open standard that specifies how to generate one-time password codes. Azure Active Directory supports the use of this oath tokens, and I'm going to put the actual name there on the screen because for the life of me, I cannot pronounce that. So it supports these tokens of the 30-second or 60-second variety. Customers can then get these tokens from the vendor of their choice. Note though that the secret keys are limited to 128 characters, which might not be compatible with all tokens, unfortunately. Then guys, another authentication method is text message. Azure sends a verification code to a mobile phone using good old-fashioned SMS. The user must enter the code into the browser with a specific time period to continue. So that's a normal old school OTP, one-time PIN. I'm not a fan of it anymore. I used to be, but because of how easy it is to compromise these, I'm not a fan. It is better than having nothing. I've seen so many companies out there that literally has only an email address and a password that has to be typed in. And if you're going to tell me you at least have a PIN as well as a second authentication method, I suppose I can't go and complain because it's better than having just a password. But for the life of me, guys, please don't use OTPs if you can avoid it. Use something like the Microsoft Authenticator app or something more secure. Then we've also got voice call. So Azure uses an automated voice system to call the number, and the owner uses the keypad to confirm the authentication. Normally it'll ask you to press the pound key, which is hash. Note that this option is not available to the free trial Azure Active Directory tier though. So if you guys have got a free trial, not gonna work. And then the last one, which I believe is the 8th one on this list, if I look quickly, that's called app password. So certain non-browser apps don't support the Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication. Don't ask me which ones, I'm not quite sure. If users are enabled for Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication and they try to use non-browser apps, they'll be unable to authenticate. The app password allows users to continue to, well, authenticate. And then, guys, the registering of an authentication method. Well, I mentioned to you guys earlier, I told you guys I'm going to have a very quick slide where I'll show you the registration of authentication. So if your users need to log in with using multi-factor authentication, the very first time they log in, it's going to ask them to register an authentication method. This is why it's so important to have that transparency and that communication I spoke of earlier. If you don't tell users about this, they're going to have no idea what's going to go on. They're going to get into a little panic state. They might have a little panic attack because it looks quite intimidating, quite frankly. So tell the people, hey guys, we're going to be using multi-factor authentication. And this is what it is. This is what you'll encounter. And when you log in for the first time, this is the page you might see. There's a picture for you guys on the screen. So take that with some salt. It might look different by the time you guys see this because Microsoft likes to go and change things. This just serves as an idea as to what you might expect as a user. So you can show the guys, hey guys, this is what it might look like. It might look similar to this. It might look slightly different. But in a nutshell, this is what it might look like. It's going to require you to go and register first. But it'll only do that the first time. So when a user signs into a service that requires multi-factor authentication the first time, they will be asked to register their preferred multi-factor authentication method. They can choose their preferred method. Once they've registered, each time they sign into a service or app that requires multi-factor authentication, the Azure login process will prompt for the additional authentication information and then obviously present the methods that they've chosen or registered for. And then, folks, if you are concerned about whether people are actually implementing this the way they're supposed to, because at the end of the day, you can bring the donkey to the water, but you can't make that donkey drink. So you can tell users, hey, you need to go and register for self-service password reset. Hey, you need to go and register for multi-factor authentication. But whether they actually do that, that's a different story. So how do we know whether our users are actually doing this? How do we check adoption? That's where monitoring adoption comes into play. Microsoft's got many monitoring tools and analytic tools and logs and all kinds of things that you can go and use, or your administrators can go and use to, well, basically spy on users, for lack of a better description. So Azure Active Directory includes a usage and insights view in the monitoring section where you can go and monitor the authentication methods activity. From here, you can view the adoption of multi-factor authentication and self-service password reset. So when I say the monitoring section, guys, that'll be on the Azure portal. So if you were to find yourself onto the Azure portal, go to your monitoring section. So if you go into the blade, it looks like a navigation menu. If you go into the blade and you scroll down, you'll find that these sections in that blade, which looks like a navigation menu, they're labeled differently. There's a monitoring section there. If you go there, you'll find there's a usage and insights tab that you can go and click on there. So here's a bit of a picture for you guys of what it used to kind of look like back in the day. Please take the picture of some salt. This is from 2019, but at the end of the day, 1 + 1 will always be 2. It might look slightly different by the time you guys go in there, but it's still serve its purpose. You're going to be able to see all kinds of useful information there, whether people are actually adopting multi-factor authentication and whether they're actually adopting the self-service password reset. You can go and check, okay, you know what? 5 people have not done it yet, or 50% have not done it yet. They need to go and do it. So you can actually see what the cheese is going on in your environment. And in addition to the overall registration numbers, you can also see the success and failure of registrations per authentication method. How cool is that? And you can also learn more about self-service password reset usage in your organization through the usage tab on the main view. So if you or the user were to go and click there, it's probably going to be you, then you'll be able to learn more about this. Right, folks, believe it or not, we have finally reached the end of the first main section. Yeah, only the first main section. We've got 3 more sections to go. So the second main section in this module is Manage User Authentication. And the first thing we're going to be talking about in this section is authentication methods. Yes, once again, we're talking about authentication methods, guys. Now, as I'm sure you've probably realized by now, there are many ways you can go and prove you are who you claim to be. Some of them are very secure, some of them are very unsecure. Generally, the older methods, like a password, will be unsecure. If you go look at the newer, more modern methods like the Microsoft Authenticator app, that would be considered one of the more secure methods. At least at the present moment, that seems to be the situation. Now here's a bit of a picture for you guys as to what the process looks like, what's secure and what's not. So if you look at just normal passwords way in the column on the left, those are examples of very poor passwords, very unsecure passwords, are very easy to use, very easy to guess, and they're most likely on Microsoft's global banned password list. If you look at the second block from the left, the category that says good in gray. So that would be SMS, it's going to send you an OTP or voice. It's not bad, but it's just good. It's very easy to go and bypass that. Like I said, if I go and compromise your phone or your device, I can actually get my hands on that. So it's not the best. If you go and combine it with a password, it's better than having nothing, but yeah, it's not the best. Then we've got the second one from the right, which is better. So that would be some sort of Microsoft Authenticator. You've got software tokens, that's OTP, and you've got hardware tokens. So that's better. And then the best would be passwordless authentication. Windows Hello, Microsoft Authenticator, if you go use the passwordless authentication, or FIDO2 security key. So FIDO2 is very much the same as the old smart card method, I suppose. So it basically allows you to go and use something like your flash drive. And if you don't have that flash drive in the USB port, that machine will not log in. It will not start. So it kind of reminds me of BitLocker, to be honest. So it's very, very much the same concept. So the user does not have to go and remember a password. They don't have to worry about the password being cracked, compromised, or trying to remember it, any of that details. Nope. They just need to make sure they keep that flash drive safe. So as part of the sign-in experience for accounts in Azure Active Directory, which we call Entra ID nowadays, there are different ways that users can authenticate themselves. Historically, a username and a password is the most common way a user would provide credentials, and I think that probably is still the most common way. But with modern authentication and security features in Azure Active Directory, that basic password should be supplemented, or should I say replaced, with more secure authentication methods, which are the ones way on the right of this table. Now, since I've spoken about FIDO2 so much, here is a slide about FIDO. What is FIDO2? Hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. I just call it FIDO. So FIDO2 security keys are an unphishable standards-based passwordless authentication method that can come in any form factor. And from my experience, it will most commonly be a flash drive. Fast Identity Online, which is what FIDO actually stands for, is an open standard for passwordless authentication. And I've actually not really used this that much in my life, since I've been in training that much. So I used to be in training for a very long period of time. Then I was in the field for a very long period of time. And now I'm back in training for a long period of time. But when I was in the field, my customers didn't really make use of it yet at the time. It was still relatively a prohibiti habro kind of word. It was unknown territory, uncharted waters, if you will. So, but now I've seen more and more companies are making use of that, along with other things like Windows Hello, which is not actually a topic here. So FIDO also allows users and organizations to leverage the standard to sign into various resources without a username or a password using external security key or a platform key built into a device. Sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Now, for those of you that's curious what this might look like if you were to actually go and use this method, well, here's a bit of a picture for you guys, just for those of you that might be curious. Anyway, let's move on. The next topic is authentication in Windows Hello. And that should come as no surprise since I spoke about Windows Hello just a moment ago. And you would have been hearing me mention it here and there. So you should have known it was probably coming up. So Windows Hello is not something new, guys. If you go look at something like Windows 10, which has been out for a very long time, probably about 7 or 8 years now, it was available in the first build of Windows 10. People just didn't use it because, well, I think most of them had no freaking clue what it was. And if they did know what it was, they had absolutely no idea how to go and implement it, and that kinds of jazz. Nowadays, it's not that uncommon to find companies actually using Windows Hello. It's a very cool method or additional authentication method to go and use. So instead of just using your normal password and username, which is most likely going to go and authenticate to some sort of central authentication like an Active Directory on premises or in the cloud, Hello authenticates locally on that device. So if someone is in the middle and they're trying to intercept your communication to the authentication provider in the hopes of getting something sensitive like a username and a password, that's not really going to help them much because you still need to authenticate locally on that device. And that's something they would obviously not get a hold of in that exact moment. So this could be something like a PIN, could be a fingerprint, and I've seen some companies even go and use facial recognition, which is quite cool. So in Windows 10 or 11, Windows Hello for Business replaces passwords with strong two-factor authentication on PCs and mobile devices. So this includes tablets and phones, folks. This authentication consists of a new type of user credential that is tied to a device and uses a biometric or PIN. So as I've said, the biometric could be your fingerprint, could be facial recognition. From my experience, it's normally a PIN, but I have seen some people use a fingerprint or a facial recognition concept as well. Windows Hello for Business lets users authenticate to an Active Directory or an Azure Active Directory account, if you want to go and configure it like that. And Windows Hello addresses the following problems with passwords. Problems like strong passwords can be difficult to remember, as you probably would have seen if you users. And users often reuse the same passwords on multiple platforms and multiple sites. So if they have a password, for example, for their Gmail, it's more than likely the same password they'll use for their laptop or their desktop. And it's probably the same password they use at work for their Active Directory account and for many other things. Most likely even their banking. It's probably one of the most unsecure things that most users do. And scary enough, a lot of people actually do this. So it basically gets around that issue, if you will. It also addresses things like server breaches, which can expose symmetric network credentials, passwords in other words. It also addresses passwords, which are subject to replay attacks. And then lastly, the fourth one I'll mention here for you guys is it addresses the issue of users that inadvertently expose their passwords due to phishing attacks. And let's face it, that's always the weakest link in any company. You can have the latest of the latest, the best of the best, security that looks like it's straight out of NASA. But at the end of the day, if you do not educate the users, it's not going to help you much, all that security. And I've had companies, some clients, where I would educate users. I would tell them, ma'am, sir, if you see an email with an attachment and you are not expecting that attachment or that link in that email, do not click it, do not open it. Some of them will be like, oh, okay, cool, that makes sense. And then some of them will say that, but they still go and click on that attachment or that link. Maybe the link says how to make money in only 5 days. And they'll be like, ooh, juicy. Let me click on that. Boom. The whole company's got ransomware. Or boom, the account's not just been compromised because of a phishing attack. Unfortunately, people are very gullible, which is why it's so important for you to go and enforce as many security measures as possible. Anyway, folks, speaking of people helping themselves, that brings us to the next topic, Azure Active Directory Self-Service Password Reset. We did mention this once or twice earlier in this module already, so you should have a fairly good idea of what this is. Well, quite frankly, you should actually know exactly what this is at this point in time. They probably no longer call it Azure Active Directory self-service. They probably call it Entra ID self-service password reset. It's a functionality that generally was not available on all licenses, and you normally had to go and turn this on first for your organization. And from my experience, I've seen most things actually are turned on by default these days. So that's the good news. Hopefully this is one of them. Azure Active Directory self-service password reset gives the users the ability to change or reset their password with no administrator or help desk involvement. So the whole idea here is for them to harass you or bug you less so that you can focus on more important things regarding the productivity environment. But we know, even though we're going to implement this, the users will still expect you to go and do it because they want to be spoon-fed. That's normally how it is. So it says if a user's account is locked or they forget their password, they can follow the prompts to unblock it themselves and get back to work. Visibility reduces help desk calls and loss of productivity when a user can't sign in to the device or an application because they can spend this time doing it themselves, they can fix it themselves, they can get back to work themselves. But unfortunately, yeah, we know they're not going to go and do that. They're going to expect you to still do it for them. All right, and then the last topic I want to mention in this section, it's a bit shorter this section, is what are tenant restrictions? So organizations can control access to software as a service cloud applications based on the Azure Active Directory tenant the applications use for single sign-on. An example would be you may want to allow access to your organization's Microsoft 365 applications while preventing access to other organization instances of the same applications. So that could be an example. They say with tenant restrictions, organizations can specify the list of tenants that their users are permitted to access, and Azure Active Directory only grants access to these permitted tenants. So there's a bit of information for you guys. Right, folks, that brings us to the end of the second main section, moving into the third main section out of four: plan, implement, and administer conditional access. Now, conditional access is one of my favorite things in the cloud about 365 and Azure. I wouldn't say it is my favorite. One of my personal favorites is probably data loss prevention policies, but that's not a topic right now. Conditional access, it's right up there. It's one of my favorites. Not the favorite, but it's right up there. Alright, folks, so into the first topic in this section, and ironically, that is not conditional access. The first topic is something a little bit different. It is plan security defaults. Now, security defaults is actually something pretty cool. If you ever find yourself in this situation, and you probably will, where you've got no idea what you're doing because you're brand new to a certain tool or a certain platform, then this is where this applies. Everybody, including myself, starts at rock bottom with everything in life. Now, if you're going to tell me, hey, that you have always known everything about Microsoft Azure or Microsoft 365, I'm going to know you're lying to me. There's no such thing. So you might know a lot now. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you do, you most certainly did not start off like that. Now, if you're starting in a company or at a client's company and you need to go and implement some security and you've got no idea what you're doing, security defaults is what's going to help you and what's going to save you. Now, this is a setting that you can go and leave on, and if you go and leave this setting on, it will apply certain security settings and configurations in that Azure environment, which is normally what the average company would need. And as time goes by and you learn more and you start finding your feet, you can then go and maybe turn that off, maybe make a couple adjustments, a couple configurations. But until then, this is what's going to save your hiney. Now, there's a picture for you guys of what that would more or less look like. Please take that with some salt once again, because we know Microsoft likes to go and change things. But that is more or less what it looked like and where you could normally find it in the past. Now you might have to go around and search for it in that little search bar at the top. So managing security, guys, can be difficult with common identity related attacks like password spray, replay, and phishing becoming more and more popular by the day, and that's just to name a few. Security defaults provides secure default settings that Microsoft manages on your behalf of an organization to keep customers safe until organizations are ready to manage their own identity security story. Security defaults provides pre-configured security settings such as requiring all users to register for Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication. That sounds like a good one, doesn't it? Requiring administrators to perform multi-factor authentication. That's definitely a good one. Blocking legacy authentication protocols. If you don't remember what the word legacy means, it means something is old. So any old way of authenticating, that will be blocked. Requiring users to perform multi-factor authentication when necessary, and that's probably going to be a lot. And protecting privileged activities like access to your Azure portal. This is just to name a few. This is obviously not limited to this, but these are the main ones, and these are the ones that will test you on the exam. So for those of you that need to go and write the exam associated with this course, please make a note of what I've just written on the screen for you guys. They will test you on that exam, and this will be a question exam. So they will ask you about security defaults in the exam, and they want to check if you understand that this is a setting that you or an administrator can go and apply if you don't really know what you're doing yet, if you're brand spanking new, you're still kind of finding your feet, and they want to check if you know what will actually happen if you go and turn this on. Now, yes, there's a lot that's going to happen, but these things that's listed on the screen are the main things they will test you on. So make sure you remember all 5 of these things I've just listed. I know it's a lot to remember, but unfortunately, guys, I'm just a messenger here. I'm not the guy that's setting up the exam. I'm just a messenger telling you what will be in the exam, if this will be in the exam. Unfortunately, you're going to be required to remember all 5 of these. So if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't remember all 5 of these, please do not go and attempt the exam yet. Go and study some more. Write it down on some flashcards. Maybe put it down on a piece of paper. Put it behind your toilet door so that every time you go to the loo, you can go look at this piece of paper. But it's very, very important that you remember all 5 of these when you go write the exam, guys. I cannot emphasize how important that is. Anyway, so with regards to planning your security defaults, who is it for? Who should use security defaults? So this is just more of adding on to what we just discussed. More important information, I should say. So I'm going to tell you guys about who should use it and who should not use it. So let's start off. Who should use these security defaults? That will be organizations that want to increase their security posture but don't know how or where to start. Generally, that's when they are not outsourcing their IT. It might be a brand new company or a brand new IT guy. These are just some of the situations that can cause this. It can also be organizations utilizing the free tier of Azure Active Directory licensing. That's also a situation where this might apply. Now, who should not use security defaults? That, guys, will be organizations currently using conditional access policies to bring signals together, make decisions, and enforce organizational policies. Now, you might say, but that sounds like a problem. Well, guys, keep in mind that normally by the time you get to this point where you're able to create conditional access policies, if you know what they are, how to go and make them, where to go and make them, and how to go and configure them, and all that kind of stuff, at that point in time, it probably will no longer be needed for you to go use the security defaults because you're going to know enough at that point in time to be able to create conditional access policies. So it's not really a big problem if you think about it. It's also not for organizations with Active Directory premium licenses. And lastly, guys, it's not for organizations with complex security requirements that warrant using conditional access. So yeah, there's a couple of ideas for you guys. Now, just a little bit about conditional access policies, since this section is mainly about conditional access policies. It was kind of in the title of this flippant section. So what are conditional access policies, you ask? Well, guys, that is to give your users or outsiders access to resources, either on premises or in the cloud, on condition of them meeting certain conditions, like the name suggests. Now, some courses and some trainers might say to you, it's only for resources on premises. Some might say it's only for resources in the cloud, but that's not true. It can be used for both on premises as well as resources in the cloud. So if you've got users, staff members, contractors, consultants, whatever, it's probably going to be your own staff members that needs to access resources of yours from some place like home, because let's face it, most people are working from home these days. You probably are feeling a little bit uncomfortable about that. Because as we know, people don't necessarily use company assets. They might be using their own laptop, their own tablet or phone. They're using their own internet connection. I don't know what device they're using. I don't know what operating system they're using. Well, at least in the beginning, I might not. I don't know if they've got any security, like some sort of proper antivirus installed in that device. I don't know if they've been compromised. All of these are concerns. So to help with that, I can force these users to meet certain conditions first before they'll be granted access to my company resources. These can be conditions like the user has to have multi-factor authentication. If the user does not have multi-factor authentication, they're seen as too much of a risk to allow them access to company resources. I can force them to have a password. I can force them to have certain complexity requirements with this password. It has to be at least 10 characters or 12 characters long. If it's shorter than that, no go. I can force the user to be geographically speaking in a certain location in the world. We normally do that using public IP addresses, but it is something you can go and do. So if you guys are curious how to go and configure these conditional access policies, do yourself a favor, go to the Azure portal, go to Azure Active Directory, which they call Entra ID now. When you get to that blade, scroll down, scroll to the security tab. When you click on the security tab, once you click on that, you'll find there's a tab that's going to say conditional access. Alternatively, if that doesn't work for you, just go to the search bar on the Azure portal at the top. Just start typing in conditional access. You're going to see before you even start finishing the word, it's going to pop up with conditional access policies. And there you'll be able to go and configure the risks associated. You can go and grant or deny access based on certain conditions. It looks complicated and overwhelming in the beginning when you get there on the portal, but trust me, it's actually not that complicated. It's actually very straightforward, guys. Do not judge a book by its cover. Now, what are some of the benefits of conditional access? Hopefully, I haven't given away too much of it. That will be to increase productivity. It will be to manage the risk in your company. That one makes more sense because now if people have to meet certain conditions first before they can access my resources, I then can sleep peacefully at night knowing there's less of a risk because I know people can't just go and willy-nilly access resources. Normally that would be a concern because maybe they've gone to some pirate website, they've downloaded the latest Avengers movie or the latest Call of Duty game. Now they got themselves compromised. They've got some sort of virus or ransomware on the machine, or they've got spyware on that machine. And now they want to bring that compromised machine into my environment and access company resources. No, thank you. So now I can sleep peacefully at night knowing that they need to meet certain conditions first before they'll be granted access. Other benefits is it addresses compliance and governance issues. That makes logically sense. It allows you to manage cost. And lastly, guys, it allows you to address the issue of zero trust. The zero trust model, as some might call it. So looking at this list, what do I mean by some of this in case you're not sure? If we look at the first one, it says increased productivity, which is kind of obvious. Only interrupts the user with a sign-in condition like multi-factor authentication when one or more signals warrants it. If there's not more than one signal that warrants it, it will not interrupt the user. That is how they get to the point of increasing productivity. If it's going to ask the user every second moment, hey, please authenticate. Hey, please authenticate. That's basically going to be spending so much time on authenticating that you're going to have no time for productivity. So if the user only gets prompted to authenticate when it really is needed, that means they're spending more time doing work and less time authenticating, which is where the productivity comes into play. Looking at the second one where we said manage risk, if you're not sure what that means, this is automating risk assessment with policy conditions, which means risky sign-ins are at once identified and remediated or blocked. Coupling this conditional access with identity protection, which detects anomalies and suspicious events, allows you to target when access to resources is blocked or gated. And then looking at the third one we had there, which says address compliance and governance. What do we mean there? So this is when the certificate authority, well, that's CA for short, enables you to audit access to applications, present terms of use for consent, and restrict access based on compliance policies. Pretty nifty and useful, wouldn't you say? The fourth one on that list was managing cost, which is moving access policies to the Azure Active Directory, which reduces the reliance on custom or on-premises solutions for certificate authority and the infrastructure costs, of course. And then the last one, good old-fashioned zero trust. So this is just conditional access, which helps you move towards a zero trust environment. And a zero trust, for those of you that watched the previous module, has got those 3 requirements you need to try and meet. One of them being, assuming you've been compromised. If you assume you've been compromised, well, it's going to be a lot harder to compromise you if you just work on that model as if you have been compromised already, of course. And then a little advice to all of you guys, and yes, this might be in the exam, a couple of configurations that you might want to try and avoid. So for all users and all cloud apps, block access. This configuration blocks your entire organization. So if I just say block access, that means block the entire organization. Require device to be marked as compliant. Should you go and choose that option, and yes, it's an actual option you can go and choose on the Azure portal. This is for users who have not yet enrolled the devices. This policy blocks all access, including access to the Intune portal for those of you that make use of Intune. If you are an administrator without an enrolled device, this policy blocks you from getting back into the Azure portal to change the policy. So just be very careful of that you don't go and lock yourself out of your own environment. It has happened in the past. I have seen this happen. The third one is require hybrid Azure Active Directory domain joined devices. So if you don't know what that means, this access blocking policy also has the potential to block access for all users in your organization if they don't have a hybrid Azure Active Directory joined device. The fourth one, require app protection policy. If you don't know what that option means, what that setting means, this access blocking policy has the potential to block access for all users in your organization if you don't have an Intune policy. If you are an administrator without a client application that has an Intune app protection policy, this policy blocks you from getting back into the portals such as Intune and Azure. So once again, take note of that. Otherwise, you're going to end up locked out. And then for those of you where we want to go and use this setting where it says for all users, all cloud apps, and all platforms. So that's the difference here. This one says all platforms, where the previous one did not. It's got one setting which says block access, and this configuration blocks your entire organization once again, just like the previous one. So it does not matter whether it says for all platforms or not. If you go and choose the one that just says block access, it blocks the entire organization, guys. Alright, so let's talk about benefits of using app protection policies. I'm a big fan of this because, as I've said many times earlier in this course, guys, we're setting up a situation where many people are working from home these days. People are working from home. It's probably half of your company, if not more than half of your company. These folks are not necessarily using laptops or desktops like they did back in the day at the office. And if they're using these laptops and desktops, they don't necessarily belong to the company, which means you've got less control. So never mind the fact that it does not necessarily belong to you and that it's not necessarily a laptop or a desktop. We're setting up situations where people are using devices that don't necessarily have Windows on them. These devices could have operating systems on them like Android or iOS. So with all of these things I've just mentioned in mind, you can see it's a very big problem when it comes to managing these people, managing their devices, and managing the apps on their devices. So if that device they have and they're using for work does not belong to me or my company, I can't just exactly go and force policies upon that device now, can I? Or can I? There is ways you can do that, but if you would like to know that, please ask me in the comment section down below and I'll elaborate on that. Or alternatively, go and join my Discord group. You will find that in the video description. So if you check in the video description, it's literally the very last link at the bottom of the video description. I've got a Discord server. It's called Free IT Training. Feel free to go and join that IT community. I'm in that community of a whole bunch of other people. So if you've got questions about this course or any other course, there's lots of people in that community that's studying these courses that will be willing to answer your question if I don't answer you first. Now anyway, with all of that stuff I just mentioned earlier, guys, where does app protection policies come into the picture? These policies allow you to go and enforce policies on people's devices without those devices being enrolled into something like your company's Intune environment. Now, why is that a big deal? Because normally, guys, when people work remotely from places like home, we like to go and use tools like Intune. Now, Intune allows me to manage devices regardless of where they are or what they are or what operating system they've got. I can manage any device anywhere, anytime. Kind of sounds like hacking, doesn't it? Now, the catch here, guys, is these devices normally need to be enrolled into a company's Intune environment. You can think of this as giving me permission to manage your device. Now, normally you would find in a company environment, people often use their own devices. And their own personal devices, which we call BYOD, these devices are normally not enrolled into the Intune environment. If they're not enrolled, I cannot go and fully control these devices. Now that is where app protection policies comes into play. With app protection policies, I do not need people's devices to be enrolled into my company's Intune environment. I can still go and control the apps on those devices. Those devices I'm talking about, guys, could be the person's own phone, their own tablet, their own laptop. It belongs to the user. It's their property. It's not necessarily enrolled into my Intune environment, but yet I can go and control those apps to a certain degree. That, in a nutshell, is what app protection policies are mainly used for. Alright, so with that in mind, Microsoft says the benefits of app protection policies is protecting your company data at the app level, not the device level, which is why it's so important that we go and use these app protection policies. End user productivity isn't affected, and policies don't apply when using the app in a personal context. So the policies are applied only in a work context, which gives you the ability to protect company data without touching personal data. That's pretty nifty these days, considering people like to have their own personal data on devices, and considering that they will be using their own personal devices. The third benefit here, guys, is app protection policies ensure that the app layer protections are in place. What do we mean? This is, for example, you can go and require a PIN to open an app in a work context. You can control sharing of data between apps and prevent the saving of company app data to a personal storage location. These are just some of them. The fourth benefit of app protection policies, according to Microsoft, and of course, is MDM. In addition to MAM, ensures that the device is protected. So MDM, if you don't know, is mobile device management, and MAM is mobile application management. MDM is not something specific, guys. It's a broad spectrum. So you get many mobile device management tools. The main one, the most common one, and the most widely used one is Microsoft Intune, the tool I've been speaking about this whole time. I had hundreds, if not thousands of clients in the industry, and every last one of them used Intune as their MDM tool of choice. There is other ones out there. Do not ask me in the comments what they are, because I've got no idea. I've never used them because none of my clients had them. But if you happen to know of another example of an MDM, please let me know in the comment section down below. I would like to know, just out of curiosity. But realistically, you'll find that no companies really use them. It's generally just Microsoft Intune. Now, Intune, the MDM, allows you to manage both the device as well as the applications on condition of these devices, of course, being enrolled into Intune. And an MAM, mobile application management, is normally just to go and manage the actual applications and devices. So it does not have as much control as MDM, but it's still better than having nothing, in my opinion. All right, moving on to the next topic, smart lockout. How smart lockout works. So by default, guys, smart lockout locks the account for 1 minute after 10 failed attempts. So if you don't know what smart lockout is, it's basically going to help protect you, or more specifically your users, if someone tries to log into their accounts unauthorized. Someone is trying to get up to some sort of shenanigans. Someone is trying to break into an account. They're trying to crack an account's password, something in that regard. So smart lockout is going to look for bad actors. It's going to look for people up to no good. It's going to detect those signals. If it sees someone logging in, a lot of failed attempts, so they keep getting the password wrong and wrong and wrong, that looks suspicious. And smart lockout's going to do something about that. Or the people suddenly start logging in from weird locations or irregular hours. That's where smart lockout comes into play. So by default, guys, smart lockout locks the account for 1 minute after the user gets their password wrong 10 times. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous. I would have personally preferred that thing to be free failed attempts by default, but unfortunately, the default here, guys, is 10. Make a note of that. It's a question in the exam pool. I can't guarantee that you will get it. Some of you guys might get it. Some of you guys might not get it. So if the exam pool has, for example, 500 possible questions, and you get 50 randomly out of that 500, your chances are about 10% of you getting that. So I would say you've got about a 10 to 20% chance of getting that question in the exam. Should you be one of the unfortunate souls that gets that question, now you know. The default is 10 failed attempts. If you had to guess, you probably would have guessed 3 failed attempts because that's what normally most things in life is. I would have honestly have guessed 3 failed attempts, but it's not 3, guys. It's 10 failed attempts. Yes, you can go and change it should you want to, and I do recommend that you go and change that. I recommend you make it about 3. 10 is just crazy, man. All right, and then also how smart lockout works is the account is locked again after subsequent attempts for increasing periods. So the first time it locks, which is now by default after 10 times, it will lock for only 1 minute. And should they get it wrong after the 11th try, it'll lock again but longer. And should they get it wrong for the 12th try, it'll lock again but even longer and longer and longer. And so it carries on. Smart Lockout is always on for all Azure Active Directory customers, so that's a good thing. I mean, you want something like that to be on, obviously. The default configuration can be customized, like I said, and I do encourage you to go and do that. It's not part of the exam, it's just something I encourage you to go and do. It's just being safer. So if it says 10 failed attempts, by God, guys, please make that 3 or make it less than 3. Smart Lockout doesn't guarantee that a genuine user never gets locked out, but it is tailored to resisting bad actors. We did actually briefly mention this earlier. The topic was not Smart Lockout, but I did tell you guys, sometimes your own users will actually get locked out. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, rather have too much security than not having enough security. So if your security is so freaking tight, where even your own real genuine users sometimes get locked out accidentally, that's a good thing. That means it's doing what it's supposed to do. Smart Lockout also can be integrated with hybrid deployments. So if you have a situation where you've got on-premises Active Directory and Active Directory in the cloud, which, well, a lot of companies do these days, it does in fact work with that situation as well, guys. Right, that finally brings us to the end of the third main section of this module. Wow, my mouth feels like a cotton ball and we still have one whole section to go. The fourth and the last main section of this module, guys, is managing Azure Active Directory identity protection. So I should probably rephrase that and say manage Entra ID identity protection, but Microsoft hasn't quite caught on yet. So just know that this is called Entra ID now, guys. The first topic we're going to be talking about in this last section is identity protection basics. So identity protection is a tool that allows organizations to accomplish 3 key tasks, guys. The first of which is automate the detection and remediation of identity-based risks. The second is investigate risks using data in the portal, and it's got a lot of that. And the third is export risk detection data to third-party utilities for further analysis. So if your company, your client's company's got some sort of third-party tool that they can go use to analyze data, well, you can in fact now go and export it and you can go and analyze it further in that third-party tool. This wasn't always possible in the past, but now, guys, it actually is, which I find quite fascinating. Now, as for the types of risks which are detected, guys, just in case you're curious, there's quite a few I'm going to mention. I'm going to mention 10 for you guys. Yes, 10. That's quite a lot. I know it's a mouthful. The first one is anonymous IP addresses. Yes, that is seen as a risk. Why is someone or something using an anonymous IP address? So anonymous IP address, the sign in from an anonymous IP address, for example, is for a browser, or you get these VPN connections, or someone uses some sort of anonymizer. So if you use anything that basically hides, disguises your IP address or spoofs your IP address, all of these things are detected. So if you or someone in your company decides to go and use a VPN now to bypass something, or for just your own personal security, it will detect that. Unfortunately, if you're going to be using a VPN for your own personal security, that's not necessarily because you're up to no good. But the system will detect that and it might potentially block you in those situations. So that will be an example for false positive. Something else which would be considered a risk is atypical travel. So what does this mean? It's a sign-in from an atypical location based on a user's recent sign-ins. So if someone suddenly signs in from a very weird location and it's physically impossible, maybe you were in a country called country A, maybe this is the United States, and then 5 minutes later you suddenly sign in from the United Kingdom. That's impossible for you to travel that quickly in such a large distance. It's not possible. And this can even apply in one country. So if you are still in the same country, but you're logging in from a different location in that country, and that location is exceptionally very far away, and this is in a very short span of time, it's going to detect that. You'll find that even a lot of banks do this these days. It's kind of off topic, but if you are swiping your bank card in one location, in one shop, and then 5 minutes later, you swipe that same bank card in a different location, which is very far away, and the system detects that, it will block your card. A lot of banks has actually got this built in. It's probably because someone skimmed your card, they've cloned your card, and now they're trying to spend your money elsewhere. So the banks actually detect that automatically and it blocks your card. I know it's very annoying, but at the end of the day, trust me, you want that. Otherwise, these people are going to be spending your money. Other types of risks that might be detected is malware-linked IP addresses. So malware-linked IP addresses is a sign-in from a malware-linked IP address. If someone signs in from an IP address which has been known to be a bad IP address, this IP address has been linked to activities in the past which are not so nice by either your organization or other organizations. It's got a track record, in other words. That IP address is now detected as a risk. The fourth one is unfamiliar sign-in properties. So if you don't know what that means, it's a sign-in with properties we've not seen recently for the given user. He or she is signing in with a new device maybe. They're signing in with something else. Maybe this person's signing in a different time. Instead of signing in the usual time slots, they're signing in a new time slot. New location, new device, new time slot. Anything weird, quite frankly. And then we've got leaked credentials. Leaked credentials indicate that the user's valid credentials have been leaked. So there is signs or signals, should I say, that Microsoft uses to detect when someone's credentials may or may not have been leaked. For example, if they suddenly sign in from a new location and a new device, that does not mean it is a situation where it's been leaked, but it's a potential symptom or sign that someone's credentials have been leaked. Why would you suddenly sign in from a new location on a new device? That is usually a key tail sign that someone's credentials have been leaked and someone else is now using your credentials on a new device in a new location. Then we've got good old-fashioned password spray. This indicates that multiple usernames are being attacked using common passwords in a unified brute force manner. So if you don't know what that means, someone's going to go take a very well-known common password, most likely one of those on Microsoft's global banned password list. So this would be literally like this password, for example, here on the screen, one of these two passwords. They'll go and use one of these two passwords I've got on the screen. That's just an example. It's not limited to those two passwords, guys. They'll go and use one of these two passwords, and they'll use these passwords on everybody's account. Now, they might not get a hit on the first account, or the second, or even the third, but sooner or later, somewhere in a company, they're going to get a hit on one of the accounts. Someone, somewhere in the company would have used these passwords. That's a password spray attack. So it's actually able to detect that kinds of behavior. Then we've got Azure Active Directory Threat Intelligence, which I should probably say is Entra ID Threat Intelligence. So Microsoft's internal and external threat intelligence sources have been identified as a known attack pattern. And we've got new country, which I kind of sort of did cover earlier. So this detection is discovered by Microsoft Cloud App Security, and it basically just checks if you're signing in from a new country. So you'll find any company, a proper big, medium, or large size company that's worth its salt, usually, if users are going to be logging in from a new country, they need to inform the IT staff. So if you, for example, want to come to my country to attend this training in person, and you plan on signing into your company environment from my country, you should probably inform your company that you're going to be traveling to my country, because when you sign in, their security will more than likely detect you, and it's going to look suspicious to them. So you need to inform them, hey guys, next week I'm going to go to company X or country X. I'm going to be logging in most likely from that country. So if you see my account signing in from that country, it is me. It's not something funky going on. It is me. I am indeed traveling to that country. Then at least the IT team would know about it and they can kind of ignore it as a false positive. Then we've got activity from anonymous IP addresses, which kind of explains itself again. So this detection is discovered by Microsoft's Cloud App Security once again. And then the last one, the 10th one on this list, guys, is suspicious inbox forwarding. So this detection is discovered also by Microsoft's Cloud App Security. Many of these, if not all of these, are discovered by Microsoft's Cloud App Security. Right, folks, identity protection permissions. So here's a bit of a table for you guys as to what those are. At first glance, you'll notice these look very similar to NTFS permissions, and that's because, well, it is Microsoft after all, so that should come as no surprise, but the permissions will be very, very much the same. So as for a global administrator, he or she can do anything. They've got full access to everything on the Azure portal, never mind identity protection. And if you look down the list, the other roles have got less and less permissions, or should I say privilege. So if you look at the security administrator, they've got full access to identity protection, and what they cannot do is reset passwords for a user. That will be a user management administrator, which is not actually on this list. You've got security operator. So what they can do is they can view all identity protection reports and overview blade. They can dismiss user risk, confirm safe sign-in, and confirm compromise. But what they cannot do is configure or change policies. They cannot change someone's password, and they cannot configure alerts. The last one on the list, guys, is security reader. So he or she will be able to view identity protection reports and overview blade. They cannot configure or change policies. They cannot change the user's password. They cannot configure alerts, and they cannot give feedback on detections. Alright, folks, moving on to the next topic, user risk policies. Alright, so there's a bit of a picture for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. It's not the best, it's not the latest, but at least you've got an idea. Obviously, you will see this once you actually go into the Azure portal. And, more than likely Microsoft has changed it. Microsoft likes changing these things. So it might look slightly different by the time you guys go in. I mean, they change this sometimes on a daily basis, never mind a weekly or a monthly basis. So with regards to user risk policies, both sign-in risk policies and user risk policies can be enabled to automate the response to risk detections and allow users to self-remediate. It's your choice whether you go and make use of both, but I would recommend you go and make use of both. I mean, why would you not? Organizations must decide the level of risk they're willing to accept, balancing user experience and security posture. So you want to keep your environment as secure as possible, but at the same time, you don't want to inconvenience your users or basically keep them from doing their work. So if you're going to get annoying and ask them for a password and username on every bloody page, then yeah, people are not going to get any work done here today. So you need to balance work, but at the same time balance security. It's quite a difficult juggling act that you have to go and do, if I have to say so myself. All right, and then we've also got something called risk reports. Once again, there's a picture on the right, which may or may not look like that by the time you guys go in there. So these risk reports, guys, they're very conclusive. They show you a lot of useful information. Each report launches with a list of all detections for the period shown at the top of the report. Each report allows for the addition or removal of columns based on the administrator's preference. So if you or one of your administrators like to go and add columns or remove columns, maybe there's something you would like to see that's not currently shown, maybe it's showing a couple of things that you don't care for in your specific environment, you can go and customize the columns that's shown to you. Administrators can also choose to download the data in a .csv file. No surprise there, Microsoft's got a real fetish for CSV files. Or you can go down it in a JSON format. Now that's something interesting which I have not always seen. Reports can be filtered using filters across the top of the report. So if you have a filter you would like to go and apply because you're looking for something specific, they do have filters available for use that you can go and apply should you want to go and do that. Now, as for report details, yeah, there's quite a lot of things you guys can go and see. So the first thing we're going to talk about is risky users reports. We're going to talk about risky users and risky sign-ins. So on the risky user report side of the coin, which users are at risk, have had risk remediated, or have had risk dismissed. It will show you things like that in the report. It'll show you details about detections regarding these risky users. It'll show you history of all risky sign-ins. Wow, so that can be a lot, to take in. And it will just in general show you risk history. As for actions, yes, there's actions you can go and apply. You can go and do things like reset the user's password. You can go and confirm that the user is compromised, dismiss user risk, block user from signing in, or investigate further using the Azure Advanced Threat Protection. These are just summary actions, and those are the main actions. Now, as for the other side of the coin, the risky sign-ins report side of the coin, which sign-ins are classified at risk, confirmed compromised, or confirmed safe, dismissed, or remediated. These are just some of the reports. Then you can also go check real-time and aggregated risk levels associated with sign-in attempts, detection types triggered, conditional access policies that have been applied, multi-factor authentication details, device information, application information, and location information. So you can see quite a lot about these risky users. So you can actually even see where they are at. And that's of course based on public IP address once again. Actions that can be applied, and keep in mind these are not necessarily all of them, is confirm sign in compromise or confirm sign in safe. Those are the actions they've given us that you can go and apply in these situations. Alright folks, the last topic I've got for you in the last section for this module is remediate risks and unblock users. So we are going to try, or at least that's the idea here, to solve the risk issue, whatever is causing this risk. That's what they mean by remediate. And then eventually, ultimately unblock these users so they can carry on with their day. So administrators have the following options to go and remediate. I've got a couple I'm going to mention for you guys. The first is self-remediation with risk policy. So if you allow users to self-remediate with Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication and self-service password reset in your risk policies, they can actually go and unblock themselves when a risk is detected. These detections are then considered closed by the system. Users must have previously been registered for the Azure multi-factor authentication, which I showed you guys earlier, and self-service password in order to use when risk is detected. So if these users in question have not registered for the multi-factor authentication and self-service password, let's face it, a lot of them are not going to do that because they're lazy. They want you to go and do this for them. So if they have not done that, which they probably have not, then this will actually not work, guys. The second thing you can go and make use of is manual password reset. And it does exactly what it says. So if requiring a password reset using a user risk policy is not an option, administrators can close all risk detections for a user with a manual password reset. So administrators are given two options when resetting a password for users. Then we've got dismiss user risk. So if a password reset is not an option for you because, well, for example, user has been deleted, you can then go and choose to dismiss the user's risk detections because, well, they've been deleted, so there's no point in it. When you do click on the dismiss user risk, all events are closed and the affected user is no longer at risk because, well, you've closed it. However, because this method doesn't have an impact on the existing password, it doesn't bring the related identity back into a safe state. So that's just something to keep in mind. And the last remediation here, guys, is to close individual risk detections manually. So by closing individual risk detections manually, you can lower the user risk level. Yep. Typically, risk detections are closed manually in response to a related investigation, such as when talking to a user reveals that an active risk detection is not required anymore. So you'll see sometimes from time to time when you talk to the user, you'll see, oh, okay, you know what, it's actually not necessary. Oopsie daisy, false positive. Alright folks, that finally brings us to the end of the second module. So it's kind of more or less the same length as the first one. I think the first module was about an hour and a half. This is probably going to be give or take an hour and a half long as well. I can't see the timer right now, so I've got no idea. I'm just kind of shooting out of the hip here. So guys, thank you very much for watching this module. I hope you've learned something. I hope you benefit out of this. And I really hope you guys do well on your exam if you're studying for the exam. So for those of you that have not done it yet, please give the video a like. I really do appreciate it. And it does push this video out to more people on YouTube. It actually needs it when you do that. So you're helping me and you're helping the channel and other people out there. And if you find this stuff interesting, useful, or if you'd like to know when Module 3 comes out, maybe consider subscribing. Then at least YouTube will inform you of when the next module, being Module 3, comes out, or when my other videos for my other courses comes out. Lastly, folks, before you disappear, I just normally give a shout out and a thank you to all of you that's been sponsoring the channel. And if you would like to sponsor the channel yourself, you can also find that information in the video description down below. So special shout out and thank you to all the Patreon sponsors. There they are. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you. Special shout out and thank you to all the PayPal sponsors. Thank you very much, guys. And to all of those of you that's been clicking on the thanks button below the video or that's been buying me a milkshake or coffee. Once again, you can find all the sponsorship links in the video description down below. And then the very last thing in this video is just a reminder that we do have a Discord channel, guys. I am in that channel. Other trainers are in that channel, that Discord server. And also other people that's studying this course. Some of them have completed this course along with many other courses. And if you just in general want to hang out in the community of like-minded people, that's the community for you. Alright folks, it's been fun. I'll speak to you again in Module 3 of the Microsoft SC-300 course.